Hello, and welcome to the live stream of Chandrayaan 3, which is ISRO's next attempt to land on the moon. If you don't know what ISRO is, it's the Indian Space Agency, essentially. So this is, a mission that a lot of India is behind, and it's kind of a big deal because it'll actually be the first time, if they are successful, that they're actually landing on the lunar surface. And it would also make India the fourth country to be able to pull this feat off. There haven't been that many countries that have been able to land on the moon. So far, it's just America, Russia, and China. So getting India on the board as a country that can achieve this type of mission would be really cool. If you don't know me, I'm Josiah. I'm the chief engineer at a student group called Astra. We are, engaged in trying to develop things for space in this group, and right now we're trying to build a rocket, not that goes to the moon or anything. It's just one that goes up to 3 kilometers. But we're hoping to be able to build a rocket in the future, which will be able to reach space. So, of course, because we have some like interests here, we're very excited about the launch of, or the landing of the Chandrayaan 3. There's another element to this that is kind of a little bit close to home for us because many of the people in our group are Indian. So this is, of course, a chance for us to celebrate the accomplishments that the Indian Space Agency is currently going through. And hopefully we'll be able to witness a successful landing. So if you don't know much about the mission so far, about what's been going on with this Chandrayaan 3, there's a little bit of history to it. Of course, this is the third one, so they've had 2 iterations before this. The first mission was just an orbiter that went to the moon, and it was kind of like a initial testing round of the Chandrayaan vehicle. The second one flew about, I think it was like 2 years ago or so. It went into orbit around the moon, and then its lander detached. It went to go down to land, but there were some problems, and it actually ended up crashing into the moon. So this is the third mission now. They're going to basically do a repeat of that second mission, except it's going to be hopefully successful this time. The lander is very similar to the second one that flew, so with obviously some updates for some of the things that went wrong. They have some more sophisticated guidance systems on board, and hopefully a more reliable attitude control system, because that's what actually ended up causing the problems in the first place. Before we get into those things, the live stream will be starting up real quick. I have included a time for when the lander is expected to be touching down, so you can see that in the touchdown clock, which is just right over here. It's not going to be exactly precise because, of course, this is kind of a live mission, so the exact touchdown time might vary depending on various circumstances and factors. The landing is kind of a bit automated, but there are some kind of like AI type things on board which will allow the lander to have a little bit of play with exactly when it lands and exactly where it lands. But we can talk about that a little bit coming up as well. But first, let's talk a little bit about what the mission is and like what's going on with this vehicle. So here you can see the mission profile. So this is kind of the way that it flew off to the moon. It first went into this elliptical orbit, which it then used its propulsion module to just slowly add energy to that orbit until eventually it was on a trans-lunar injection orbit. And then that's when it went all the way to the moon, and then it started to do its circularization burns, where it basically starts off in this really elliptical orbit, and then it slowly just breaks itself every time it gets to the periapsis, and then you slowly just bring that orbit down into a circle. This is kind of what you typically would do if you're doing a lunar mission and you have some time. This whole process has taken about 3 months from when they actually launched it. If you remember the Apollo missions, they went all to the moon in 4 days. So obviously this is a bit of a longer trip, but it is actually conserving more fuel to do it this way. A question. Yeah, they made Chandrayaan 2 for about $150 million. Do I know how much Chandrayaan 3 costs? I actually don't know exactly how much it cost. I imagine it probably costs a bit more than $150 million this time around. Inflation and such. I assume you're counting in American dollars, the $150 million that Chandrayaan 2 originally cost. I would suspect that this one's probably more closing in on the 500 million figure. But don't quote me on that number. I'm not actually sure exactly how much the mission costs. I know that the launcher that they launched on costs around 100 to 150 million dollars itself. So uh, yeah, that's obviously an inhibitive cost as well. But it is like they do launch it on their own vehicle, so technically, I guess it's like a discount for them, right? Yeah, the 75 million number is definitely not correct. Uh, I don't think that's the number you should quote for Chandrayaan 3. That seems very suspicious. That would be an insanely cheap landing mission. Now, granted, India does often, like ISRO is able to do a lot of cheap missions typically, but I don't think they did it for that cheap. That seems, yeah, oddly like nothing at all. To put it in perspective, like the cost of doing a Mars landing for the U.S. when they send like one of the rovers to the surface, like that's like multiple billions of dollars. So this is kind of the same kind of thing. It's only going to the moon, but still, you still need the same type of rocket. You still need the same, you still need an orbiter, you still need a lander. They have a rover on this one as well. So I feel like those mission profiles are quite similar in terms of what they need to, you know, get the job done. So 75 million seems, yeah, a bit cheap. Maybe if they were just like reusing a bunch of stuff and like they just had extra parts, maybe, I don't know. Anyways, uh, coming back to the mission profile, you can see here that it's taken a little bit while for the Chandrayaan 3 to actually get to the destination. The reason for that is just to conserve fuel. They have a little tiny motor on this thing, which is doing all of this orbiting maneuvers and stuff. It doesn't have a whole bunch of thrust for the weight of the vehicle, so that's why you have to do like multiple burns. You can't just do it all in one burn. Yeah, yeah. It's kind of interesting that you can kind of almost do a mission these days for about the same amount of money that you would do for a movie. uh, which kind of begs the question as to whether you could actually maybe do in the future some movies in space, but instead of like doing like CGI, just actually go to space. Like it might actually be a cooler production if they did that. I would love to see that, like a proper like Hollywood style movie, but like have the actors or some of the scenes shot in an actual space mission. I think that would be interesting. I would definitely watch that. All right, I talked a little bit about how there's different parts to this Chandrayaan mission. Here you can see the actual vehicle. So that top bit there, the top which has the landing legs and the like kind of the box looking thing with the yellow top, that is the Vikram lander, which is the landing part of the Chandrayaan 3 mission. And then below that you can see the propulsion module. So that's the thing that's basically doing all the orbital maneuvers to get it from the Earth orbit that it was originally launched into all the way to the moon. So obviously when it's going to go and land, it's going to separate from that, and then the lander itself is going to be responsible for getting to the surface. Uh, there's a little rover inside of that, and we'll see just how that opens up. You can see here on the lander, though, there's a bunch of stuff that they have. The key things here are that it basically has 4 thrusters. You can see those just on the bottom. They're kind of sticking out. They all have the ability to produce about 800 newtons of force. So if you add them all together, that's 3.2 kilonewtons. The weight of the vehicle is just under 2 tons. So that means that they just have enough power to kind of hover above the lunar surface, which is interesting for how they are going to approach the actual landing itself. It means that they're not going to do like the SpaceX style hover slam where they just, hit the maximum thrust and they just do that until they hopefully get exactly on the right spot of the surface and they just turn off the engines. And if they miss by a second or something, like it's a failure. In this case, they can kind of hover and slowly come down to the surface in a more controlled way, which gives them more abilities to think about where they're going to land and how they're going to pick their spot that they want to get to. I believe the landing is all done themselves. Like they might have bought some of the parts for the lander itself from other places. I'm not sure if they got them from Russia or something. But I'm pretty sure that the like in terms of how they're controlling the landing, like that's their design. Uh, the those engines that I'm talking about, the landing engines, they are liquid rocket engines that run on hypergolics. So it's just two liquids that are stored separately, and as soon as they put them together, they immediately react. So there's no need for like an igniter or anything. This means that they can be restarted and stopped. So that's also valuable. And they can also be throttled quite deeply, so they can bring down the thrust so that they can slowly come down to the surface in a very controlled way. I'm not sure if those engines are built by ISRO or if they're bought from a separate agency or what. But as far as I'm aware, most of the tech on this thing is theirs. So yeah. The other aspect to the physical part of the landing is the attitude control system. And they have 8 other thrusters that are arranged around the vehicle, which can basically reorient the vehicle. And that's what went wrong last time. So they're going to be using these to make sure that the engines are pointed down and and that they're actually slowing down all the way to the surface. Last time we saw that the vehicle kind of started spinning, and then we immediately knew something was wrong, and then of course we had the crash in the end. Yes, the module does carry a rover, and I'll show you that in just a second here. So you can see here, the rover kind of is inside of the box of the lander itself, and it has that little ramp, and the ramp is going to kind of deploy out, and then the rover will be able to drive down and then start doing its roving activities. There's a bunch of sensors on the rover that they're going to be using. The main mission, or the main target of the mission, is to try to figure out what the composition of the lunar surface is where they're landing. The landing target that they're going for is near the South Pole. So it's at about 69 degrees south. So it's way down, almost near the South Pole. And it's going to be in a kind of a crater area where there's almost no sun. So the idea is that in these places where the sun never reaches, because like the angle of incidence of the sun is so low that if you're inside of the crater, like it never sees the sun. The idea is that maybe there's some liquid water, not liquid water, frozen water that's contained there. And then if we were to send humans there, we could use that frozen water to, of course, do human things, make rocket fuel, provide life support, stuff like this. Water is really important if you want to have humans in space. It's like, we can't live without water. How big is the rover? Well, to give you an idea of the sizes, the whole lander itself is about 2 tons. That's like, the size of a car. The rover is going to be probably significantly smaller than that because, of course, it has to fit inside. I think it's only 26 kilograms, I believe, was the weight that I saw floating around on the internet. So it's really not that big at all. It's like kind of like a big RC car, essentially. So it's not like the biggest of rovers. I think it's pretty much similar on size as the Spirit and Opportunity rovers that went onto Mars. So not huge, but big enough to do some science with. So they're gonna take this rover out, and they're gonna it has a bunch of spectrometers on it, so they'll be able to look at some soil and figure out what exactly is inside of it. It also has this weird like sideways deployed solar panel array, which I find interesting, which makes sense because if you think about where they're landing, right, they're way down in the South Pole, so the sun is at a low angle on the horizon always. That means if they just put the solar panels on like the top of it or something, then you wouldn't get any energy because the angle the sun makes would be terrible. So instead they have to put it like vertical and have the solar panels on the side, and then I imagine they have to kind of always be driving so that the solar panels are, incident to the sun. So that'll be interesting how they plan to do that. There's no other power source except for the solar panels as far as I'm aware. So if they go into the dark, I'm not sure it can survive. But maybe we'll have more clarification of that once the live stream starts. They might have some information that they share with us. Yeah. But yeah, in this case, yeah, there's only solar panel. I'm pretty sure there's only solar panels on the rover. So if the rover is out of the sun, I think that it's basically not going to work anymore. So I'm pretty sure that once the lunar day is over, the rover will no longer be operational. That's not a big deal because the lunar day is 14 days. So that gives them some time to do some science. It looks like the live stream of the mission just started, so we're just going to go quickly over there.
चंद्रयान चंद्रमा के सतह पर पानी की खोज करके पहले ही इतिहास रच चुका है। यही कारण है कि आजकल विश्व के तमाम अंतरिक्ष वैज्ञानिक और स्पेस एजेंसियां चंद्रमा को और करीब से जानने के लिए उत्सुक दिख रही हैं। अगर हम बात करें चंद्रयान 2 की, जो इसरो का दूसरा मून मिशन है, जुलाई 2019 में इसरो के सबसे ताकतवर रॉकेट एल्बियन द्वारा सफलतापूर्वक प्रक्षेपित किया गया था। और आज भी लगभग 4 साल बाद यह चंद्रमा के 100 किलोमीटर के सर्कुलर ऑर्बिट में।
Yeah. Just so you get an idea of when to expect certain events, as far as I'm aware, I believe that the landing burn will be starting about 20 minutes before the landing time. So as we discussed before, the landing time is going to be, it'll be in about 40 minutes or so. I'll just put the clock down there as well. It looks like they don't have a clock right now, so for now we can just use this clock. Now I'm just trying to figure out what exactly they got on the displays on the top there. I'll just move myself out of the way here. I think you can see the speed there as one of the big numbers on the screen that's like almost the furthest to the right, but a little bit further to the left. Ah, they just cut it out. Okay. Fine. We may have gotten a view that they didn't want to show us just yet. But yeah, it's actually interesting that they try to do this mission just with solar panels, especially considering where they're going, because if they're actually in this crater.
नमस्कार, इसरो के इस महाअभियान से जुड़ने के लिए आप सादर आमंत्रित हैं।
Yeah, if they're actually in that crater, where they're not going to get much sun, if they want to actually take the rover there, like I'm not sure exactly how they're going to get the energy to do that. I assume they're going to probably have, there must be a battery on board or something that can store some energy for a while, so they can achieve some operations in the dark. But yeah, we'll see. Yeah, well, if they land on the if they land on the moon, I think there's going to be a lot of happiness in the room. I can assure you of that. Because it's been a long road for a lot of these engineers to get this mission working. A lot of them have been working on it for like over 10 years, so you can imagine what it feels like.
आप लोग इस ऐतिहासिक पल को इसरो के ऑफिशियल वेबसाइट, फेसबुक, ट्विटर और यूट्यूब पे भी देख सकते हैं.
Yeah, the Japanese lander, I don't think that one was successful either, or I don't know if it's launched yet. Which one are you talking about? Do you know the name?
Welcome you to the live coverage of India's prestigious Chandrayaan 3 mission's landing event on the lunar surface. These are the visuals from Mission Operation Complex at ISRO's Telemetry Tracking and Command Network, ISTRAC, situated in Namma Bengaluru, Karnataka. I, Arushi Seth, and my colleague, Dr. Padamdeo Mishra, are your hosts for the evening and shall accompany you on the journey of the landing event from powered descent start to touchdown. Today, we shall be witnessing the final phase of the critical and most technologically challenging mission operations of Chandrayaan 3, wherein the lander module will be making a safe and soft landing on the surface of the moon. These display screens show the countdown to the power descent start as well as the path that will be followed by the lander module. We are 18 minutes away from the commencement of power descent. India is at the brink of creating history as we all await with bated breath to witness the landing on Moon's south polar region.
I would also like to point out that this is going to be the first landing of a spacecraft in the polar region of the moon. So we're going to get some interesting data in terms of the compositions of what's going on down there. It's a little bit harder to get to the poles of the moon because, of course, you have to change the inclination of the orbit. So it's a little bit easier to get into an equatorial orbit around the moon from an orbital dynamics perspective. So there are some extra challenges added here. In terms of other missions that have gone to the moon or tried to go to the moon in the last little while, there was one by an Israeli company. That one was not successful. They also had issues with their, this time it was with their engine. I think their engine had an issue and crapped out. And then they also crashed into the moon. The Japanese one, I'm not sure about this one as much. But I guess it got lost in orbit. Probably a telemetry issue. I don't think they ever attempted a landing though. So, yeah, again, not quite as successful. So yeah, Chandrayaan is the next one. There was also a Russian lander that actually just tried to land a couple of days ago. That one also failed. I'm not exactly sure what happened with that one. There's a little bit of a secrecy clouded around that one. So, well, it seems like something went wrong with, again, the propulsion system. So, yeah, landing on the moon is not easy. It's a little bit tricky. You don't have a lot of room for error. And the reason for that is that basically you're landing on an airless body. So you can't use aerodynamics to land. It's not like landing on other planets like Venus or Mars, where you can take advantage of some of the aerodynamics and, have a safer sort of landing where you're using parachutes, using heat shields. You have to land on the moon with just rockets. That's it. And you have to be able to control the attitude of your vehicle, again, with just rockets. So, yeah, it's a little more challenging. And if you just think about the problem, like, if you have a rocket engine that's on some sort of vehicle that's in space, if you're not like exactly having that thrust exactly down the center of mass of the vehicle, there's a little bit of like torque that it will induce on your vehicle, which means that you need to be having an attitude control system to like deal with those little perturbations. And yeah, it's just a tricky challenge. When you're just doing a launch vehicle or you're trying to do some sort of orbital maneuver, you can always like spin stabilize yourself and things like this. But of course, for a landing, you can't be spin stabilized because, like, you have to hit the ground, and if you're spinning, that's not going to work. So it's really, in terms of attitude control, it's really the height of challenges. And if you can master that, I would say you can pretty much master anything.
Towards Chandrayaan 3, the follow-up mission of Chandrayaan 2, which has been designed to accomplish our mission goals. The primary objective of Chandrayaan 3 mission is the demonstration of safe and soft landing on the lunar surface.
There you can see
this demonstration
separation
is a
from
critical aspect for
it.
ISRO's future interplanetary missions. In addition to this, the mission objectives also include demonstration of roving capability and conduction of in situ scientific experiments on Moon's surface. Carried on the shoulders of India's heaviest rocket LVM-3 on the 14th of July, Chandrayaan-3 was placed in the precise elliptic parking orbit of size 170 by 36,500 kilometers. ISRO, in its mission plan of following the incremental trajectory approach, carried a total of 5 earthbound maneuvers. The fifth apogee-raising maneuver, which took place on the 25th of July, placed the spacecraft in an orbit of 250 by 127,000
kilometers. In this case, she's talking about these orbits right here.
Translunar injection was carried out, after which the composite module began the final leg of its long journey of nearly 384,000 kilometers for its rendezvous with the Moon. The TLI was a key step in the mission, enabling the spacecraft to escape Earth's gravitational pull and travel to the Moon. An orbit of 288 by 369,328 kilometers was achieved at the end of the translunar injection.
जी हाँ, ट्रांसलूनर इंजेक्शन किसी भी इंटरप्लेनेटरी मिशन के लिए बहुत ही आवश्यक.
So right now, yeah, they're just describing how the vehicle got all the way to the moon, and you can see how it's going through these different, how shall I say it, slow down maneuvers. So it's just slowing itself. It'll hit the engines when it gets to the closest to the moon, slow itself down a little bit more, which causes the orbit to get a little bit tighter and smaller. And they do that until they get all the way down to 100 kilometers. Yeah, in terms of transcendence, it's going all right. Right now, we're kind of focused on Karma, which is the mini version of transcendence, and that's going to launch in October. So, if that goes well, then transcendence is looking good, or we have good karma for transcendence. Yeah. Yeah. You'll see some. We have a video that we're trying to get approved right now. We just did some propulsion testing for the Karma engine. So you should see that on the channel in a week or two. And yeah, it's actually quite interesting. We were able to get some decent success with our first propulsion trials. And we have another propulsion test, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. So yeah, we're deep in the rocket engineering phase of building Karma. So we're learning lots. Karma is just aiming for 3 kilometers. It's about a fifth the power that Transcendence will be, most likely, but it's like a lot heavier in terms of the thrust to weight ratios. That's by design. It's kind of like we're trying to make Karma almost exactly the same as Transcendence, just with smaller tanks and smaller combustion chamber. So because of that, there's like a lot of extra weight that you have to add to kind of like adapt everything down to the smaller sizes. But it means that we can just reuse all the same stuff. So like the same bulkheads, the same tube manufacturing strategies, the same recovery system, the same filling station that fills the nitrous oxide into the tanks. Everything will be the same. Hopefully that makes building Transcendence a bit cheaper, in theory. But yeah, we're just aiming for the 3 kilometers altitude. Yeah, to be honest, I'll be happy if it just gets off the rail without blowing up. So that'll be a huge success. Here you can see kind of how it's going to...
Indeed. We have arrived at the crucial juncture wherein the orbit plane contains the desired landing site at the start of powered descent. We are also happy to announce that live images from the Chandrayaan-3 lander imager camera is being received continuously.
That's awesome.
The demonstration of soft landing on the moon's surface is no ordinary feat due to the innumerable challenges and complexities involved. The lander velocity has to be killed from nearly 6,048 kilometers per hour without any aid from the thin and tenuous moon's atmosphere. The lunar dust at the time of landing and the craters and boulders scattered over the moon's surface make it further complicated to achieve this. The new and improved Chandrayaan-3 design has been built after envisaging all the scenarios which the lander module can encounter. With several software improvements, provision for full-level redundancies, a plethora of special tests, namely the integrated hot test, integrated cold test, and lander leg drop tests were carried out for the lander module. The success of these tests has provided great confidence in the performance of all the onboard sensors, propulsion system, and associated guidance, control, and navigation algorithms. The key findings during the tests have enabled to improve the overall system performance. The largely unexplored south pole of the moon has been chosen as the intended landing site, since there is a possibility of finding ice and other minerals which would be vital resources for future explorers. Apart from continuing investigations pioneered by Chandrayaan 1 and Chandrayaan 2, the Chandrayaan 3 mission will also provide invaluable data to the science community around the world. Let us give our viewers a glimpse on the configuration of Chandrayaan 3 mission.
So you can see here like the different things they're going to be using for the landing. They're going to start in the first initial part of the burn. Basically, they're going to brake quickly at the start. And then once they get kind of close to the spot where they want to land, they're going to start to get vertical and slow down and kind of do more of a slower descent rate to the surface in a more controlled way. It's cool to see how they have all these different tests. I like how they show what they're doing with their testing. In terms of the lander, like just dropping it and then using the helicopter and having it on a wire so they can kind of simulate the lunar gravity. It's actually really hard to test something like this because of that. These are their camera and imaging systems that they're using in order to do the actual landing part itself. They don't want to end up landing on a rock and being like on their side or whatever. So they have the ability to kind of correct where they're going to land based on what they see below them. And they're using things like LiDAR and visual camera and other sensors that they have on board in order to make sure that they don't land in a bad spot, essentially. And all of that is updating in real time. So like that camera is taking images like quickly, and then that's going into the control logic and telling the additive control system how to move so that it's able to land in a very precise way. And the exact landing spot is not known, right? We know the area that we want to land, but the exact spot is going to be decided basically by Chandrayaan 3. And this is kind of like I would say the new way in the last 10 to 15 years of how landers are picking their landing spots. And this is just to make sure that you land on the spot that is actually, good.
सीमा को बढ़ाकर 4 गुणे 2.4 किलोमीटर कर दिया गया है, जो कि पावर डिसेंट के दौरान
here you can see that the landing area is like a rectangle, which they're targeting, and then they will just basically try to find where the best spots are and where to avoid, and then it bases those decisions and then it decides how to navigate itself.
While Chandrayaan 1 and Chandrayaan 2 orbiter have provided abundant remote sensing data of moon, equally important are the on-site localized measurements that provide ground truths. Lander and rover have payloads which are completely new and will perform in situ analysis of lunar surface. The two spectroscopes on rover, APXS and LIBS, will actively measure the surface elemental abundances at the landing location and surrounding area. The lander carries a seismometer ILSA that can sense impact events and lunar quakes. The thermal probe CHAST will measure the temperature profile and thermal conductivity of moon's regolith. The Rambha payload will carry out lunar ionosphere studies, while the laser retroreflector array shall be a passive location indicator for future spacecraft equipped with laser altimeter. The propulsion module has not been left behind, and an experimental shape payload has been added to it as a value addition. It will help in understanding the nature and characteristics of water-rich planets and will also aid in the future study of potentially habitable exoplanets.
So what's interesting there is that all of the...
We are minutes away from the start of powered descent. The entire powered descent shall be carried out by the onboard autonomous landing sequencer or ALS, which is a series of instructions preloaded to the lander module. These instructions include the commands to be executed, data to be collected and analyzed, and decisions to be made and executed autonomously throughout the powered descent.
So yeah, everything is happening like inside of the logic of the lander. So there's no human
जी हाँ,
control here.
अब हम पावर डिसेंट के बहुत ही करीब आ चुके हैं। हम आपको बताते चलें कि पावर डिसेंट को कुल 4 चरणों में बांटा गया है। सबसे पहले आता है रफ ब्रेकिंग फेज, जिसमें लैंडर की ऊंचाई को
So we're going to be coming into the rough braking phase
किलोमीटर से घटाकर
in
7.4
probably about 5 minutes here, so 3 to 5 minutes.
प्रक्रिया को पूरा करने में लगभग
All of those sensors that she just listed off are essentially being used to perform analysis of the soil as to what it's composed of. So your seismometer, that's for determining the composition of what's underneath the moon, because they can use data from things hitting the moon to figure out how the waves interact with that, and then they can figure out what the density of the moon is in certain places. Secondly, you can use the spectrometers to figure out what exactly is in the soil itself, and they have different types of sensors which can figure out what different types of metals and compounds are inside of the soil that we could use. Specifically, water. Water is what they're looking for.
The autonomous landing sequence were carried out.
So
the whole descent is divided into 4 phases: the rough braking phase, the attitude hold phase, fine braking phase, and the local navigation phase or the terminal descent phase.
Remember that they have to scrub off about 1.7 kilometers a second of velocity
का दूसरा चरण
to
है,
land.
एक बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण फेज है। इस 10 सेकंड के स्मॉल ड्यूरेशन के दौरान लैंडर के 2 महत्वपूर्ण सेंसर कारा और लासा लैंडर की ऊंचाई की गणना करेंगे। इस फेज के पूरा होते ही लैंडर चंद्रमा के सतह से
So this is going to last about 10 minutes, the rough braking phase. And they're essentially going to descend from 30 kilometers all the way down to just
During
over 7.
During the rough braking phase, the lander velocity shall be brought down from 1,680 meters per second to 358 meters per second. The altitude will be brought down from 30 kilometers to 7.4 kilometers at the end of rough braking.
So that's most of the velocity. They're going from 1.7 kilometers a second all the way down to just 300 meters a second or so in that phase. And then
currently, we can see the scientists are analyzing the lander data.
The braking operation should be starting any time now.
कि मिशन ऑपरेशन कॉम्प्लेक्स रूप में बैठे सभी वैज्ञानिक ये जो भी डेटा देख रहे हैं वो डीप स्पेस नेटवर्क आईडीएसएन 32 के द्वारा प्रोवाइड किया जा रहा है। और अगर हम अब बात करें पावर डिसेंट के तीसरे चरण का, जो कि फाइन ब्रेकिंग फेज होगा, जिसमें लैंडर लैंडिंग साइट से जस्ट 800 मीटर की ऊंचाई पर वर्टिकली होगा। इस चरण को पूरा होने में लगभग 3 मिनट लगेंगे और इस चरण के पूरा होते ही लैंडर की वेलोसिटी लगभग शून्य हो जाएगी।
The scientists here at ISRO are glued to their systems, analyzing all sorts of complex data.
So you can see the trajectory up on the top screens there.
We are very close
and it looks like we also have one live view
to the start of the power descent phase.
If they switch to it.
जी हाँ, अगर हम अब बात करें पावर डिसेंट के चौथे और अंतिम चरण का, जो कि लोकल नेविगेशन फेज या टर्मिनल डिसेंट फेज भी कहा जाता है, इस दौरान
again, just to remind you, this phase is going to take about 10 minutes just for the rough braking phase. And once they get to that point where they're just 7 kilometers above the surface, they're going to start doing a more fine controlled attitude control phase. And then they're going to, once they get closer to the surface, they're going to get into the terminal navigation phases. Look to the top of the screen here to see all the screens that they have. The one in the middle there where you kind of see the moon surface, sort of, I think is a live view from the lander. So that will be interesting to look at as well. I would wish they would blow it up, though, a bit. It's tough to see what's going on there right now.
आप इस समय अपने स्क्रीन पे मिशन ऑपरेशन कॉम्प्लेक्स में बैठे सभी मान्यगणों को देख सकते हैं, जो कि बहुत ही उत्सुकता के साथ टेलीमेट्री डेटा को देख रहे हैं। अभी हम लोग पावर डिसेंट शुरू होने से जस्ट कुछ ही पल दूर हैं।
Okay, we should see something happening relatively soon here.
पावर डिसेंट शुरू होने में लगभग 30 सेकंड ही बचा है और हमको ये सारे डेटा मिशन ऑपरेशन कॉम्प्लेक्स रूम में आईडीएसएन 32 के द्वारा, जो कि लगातार लैंडर के कनेक्शन में बना हुआ है, प्रदान कर रहा है।
Dear viewers, the pivotal power descent has begun and the lander module is propelling towards the moon's surface along the intended trajectory.
This is good to hear. I think we can see... There you go. You can see telemetry in the top. Ah, shoot. They keep switching away from it. Looks like we've just successfully started. You can see the speed on the top screen that's most to the right beside the white one. It shows right now roughly 1650 meters per second, and you'll see that number ticking down as they slow down.
During this rough braking phase, the lander velocity shall be brought down from 1680 meters per second to 358 meters per second.
Right now we're at about 1630.
The altitude will be brought down from 30 kilometers to 7.4 kilometers at the end of rough braking. All this in the duration of 690 seconds or 11.5 minutes. Currently, the Laser Inertial Reference and Accelerometer package (LIRAP) is aiding in the navigation.
जी हाँ, अभी आप अपनी स्क्रीन पे देख सकते हैं कि
you can also see the trajectory in the screen that's beside the live view picture.
हॉरिजॉन्टल दिशा में चल चुका है।
Unfortunately, the resolution isn't the greatest, so you might not be able to
अभी तक
quite
इसकी
pick up
वेलोसिटी लगभग 31 किलोमीटर
descent line
बनी
that's
हुई
being
है।
tracked onto it. But you can follow the speed of the lander, which is being displayed on the right-hand screen with the numbers that
the lander module has traveled a distance of approximately 228 kilometers. The complete downrange that will be traveled during this phase shall be nearly 713.5 kilometers.
You can also see that they have the animation there that's beside the trajectory graph.
कुल 745 किलोमीटर की
I believe that animation is live.
आप देख सकते हैं कि हम लोग
like it just shows and represents what's happening on the rocket without actually or on the lander, sorry, without actually showing you the picture. But you can see how there's the rockets that are going from the bottom there that are like breaking downwards. But you also see those little bursts from the attitude control system. That's because it's always correcting itself so that it can be coming down exactly straight. Because like I said before, you can't spin stabilize, so everything has to be stabilized with those attitude control thrusters.
The altitude of the lander module will reduce from 7.4 kilometers to 6.8 kilometers. During the next phase, which is going to be the attitude hold phase. We can currently see that the altitude of the lander module is nearly 31 kilometers.
There you can see the green line tracking over the yellow line of the expected trajectory. So we should see that green line follow exactly down that yellow trajectory path.
आप ये देख सकती हैं कि जो भी प्रोजेक्टेड ग्राउंड रेस है उसी पे अपना लैंडर मॉड्यूल आगे चलते हुए बढ़ रहा है।
To be clear, it will deviate slightly at the very end.
देखा जा सकता
This
है
is mainly because the lander is picking its own landing spot.
370 किलोमीटर 36 दिशा में चल चुका है।
So don't let that freak you out.
The mission operations team is analyzing the data.
So far we've cut off about 1/4 of the velocity.
Concentration with which each and every parameter of the lander module is being analyzed. The performance so far seems to be nominal.
जी आरुषि।
We're still getting that live picture on the right of that trajectory
किया
screen.
जा चुका है, इसलिए ग्राउंड से कोई कमांडिंग नहीं की जा रही है। इस दौरान आपके स्क्रीन पे सारे डेटा इसरो के डीप स्पेस नेटवर्क से रियल टाइम में आ रहे हैं। इस मिशन में सेकेंड और थर्ड ऑर्डर गाइडेंस पॉलिनोमियल का प्रयोग हुआ है जो कि इनर्शियल थ्रस्ट और एंगल के हमेशा सुनिश्चित
But
करेगा.
you can see in that live update just how fast it's going.
During the
Like
entire
it's actually moving
descent,
quite
there
quickly.
is no ground intervention as the ALS has taken charge. The preparation for today's event had started nearly 48 hours before, wherein various pre-selections and uplinking of parameters were done. We can see that the vertical velocity of the lander module has been brought down. It is continuously coming down.
So we're just down to
And
1200
the
meters a
ALS had
second.
already been initiated
That's
1 hour
just
before the
over a quarter of
scheduled
the
time of the
velocity.
power descent start. Following this, the throttleable engine electronics module, the TECM, was switched on and lander was oriented to the favorable attitude.
जी हाँ, आप अपनी स्क्रीन पे देख सकते हैं कि लैंडर मॉड्यूल जिसकी शुरुआत में वेलोसिटी 1680 मीटर पर सेकंड थी, लगभग 1150 मीटर पर सेकंड हो चुकी है, जो कि एक बहुत ही मैजेस्टिक शुरुआत कही जा सकती है इस रफ ब्रेकिंग फेज के लिए.
Everything appears to be going properly so far. I would wish they would show the
यहाँ
live
पे मैं
screen.
आपको ये भी बताते
A
चलूँ
little
कि
bigger.
आप अपने स्क्रीन पे
That would be
देख
nice.
सकते हैं कि
Here we go. You can see the
लैंडर
live
मॉड्यूल
screen on
का
the left and the
आल्टीट्यूड
telemetry on the
धीरे-धीरे अब
right.
कम होता हुआ दिख रहा है और जो कि एक्सपेक्टेड भी
We're
है.
about halfway through
अभी
the
हम
rough
बात
braking
करें
phase right now.
करंट आल्टीट्यूड की,
Halfway
जो
through
कि
the rough braking phase,
28.6
and you can see our altitude has come
के
down
आसपास
2
है.
kilometers from 30
आप
to
स्क्रीन
28.
पर ये भी देख सकते हैं चंद्रयान 3 लैंडर इमेजर डिस्प्ले. The lander imager is continuously taking photographs of the moon's surface, and that is also being streamed here. Currently, the horizontal velocity has been brought down and the distance traveled is 574 kilometers. The current altitude is 27 kilometers as can be seen on the screen.
जी हाँ, करीब-करीब अपने आधे सफ़र को पूरा करते हुए इस रफ ब्रेकिंग फेज में लैंडर बहुत ही आगे की तरफ बढ़ते हुए अपनी ऊंचाई को घटा रहा है. अगर अब बात करें तो लैंडर की ऊंचाई चंद्रमा के सतह से लगभग 27 किलोमीटर से नीचे हो चुकी है, करीब-करीब
Okay, so
26.7 किलोमीटर के
we're just
आसपास
past
है.
the halfway point in the rough braking phase.
The next phase after the rough braking phase is the attitude hold phase, which will be for a duration of nearly 10 seconds. The lander will be oriented such that both the altimeters will be looking exactly towards the moon's surface. At the end of this attitude hold phase, height measurement update to navigation system will be given from the laser and car band altimeters. Currently, we are in the middle of the rough braking phase.
So that attitude hold phase is basically how they're going to reference the moon's surface and calculate more finely where their landing spot's going to be.
हॉरिजॉन्टल वेलोसिटी को लगातार कम करते हुए अपनी ऊंचाई
So far, everything seems to be going quite well.
किलोमीटर की ऊंचाई प्राप्त कर चुका है.
Everything is proceeding nominally. They're going to come down to about 350 meters per second, if I'm correct. Right now, we're at about 800, so we're almost there.
पूरी तरह से नॉमिनल है. यहाँ पर हम देख सकते हैं कि हॉरिजॉन्टल वेलोसिटी लगातार कम होती हुई दिख रही है.
Yeah, so that green line on the left-hand side, I think it's representing altitude. So it means that their altitude is lower than they were expecting.
The altitude of lander from ground is currently 12 kilometer.
But don't worry about that
currently 22
immediately.
kilometer,
Like, like I
which
said,
is
it will vary.
again going to
It will
be
vary
coming
slightly
down,
because it's on its own.
and that is expected.
It's on its own navigation.
For the viewers who have joined now, we are in the power descent phase, and we are in the rough braking phase, which is the first phase of the power descent.
What's important to look for is, like on this screen here, you can see the vertical velocity, you can see the horizontal velocity, and you can see the altitude. So right now our horizontal velocity is 750 kilometers or meters per second, and you see the vertical velocity is increasing, so it's up to 64 now. That's because as it scrubs off velocity sideways, it's basically just letting the moon pull it back down. And then it's going to start taking off that vertical velocity later on in the descent. It's kind of like how the trajectory works out. So as long as they get that vertical velocity down to 0 in the end, it doesn't really matter so much the trajectory they take.
The lander is just 17.8 kilometer from the moon surface, which is going to be around 7.4 at the end of the rough braking phase.
Yeah, the target is 7.4 at the end of this, so they have to kind of come down quickly now in the end here, so they can reach that target.
Where we will be expecting sensor update from the laser and car band altimeters. We can see the visualization of the lander module moving towards the moon's surface. The current altitude is nearly 15.2 kilometers and the distance traveled is 754 kilometers. We can also see the image that the lander imager camera has been providing.
Also, it's important to remember that the thrust to weight for the vehicle is about 1.3 or so in lunar gravity. So it can actually basically kind of take off. It's not like and it can throttle down to much lower. So it has a lot of control over how it lands.
After the rough braking and the attitude hold phase, we shall be having the fine braking phase, which will continue for nearly 3 minutes.
The fine braking phase is
The
where
whole
they're going to
phase
take
is
off
being
most of the
driven
vertical
by the
velocity.
autonomous landing sequencer and there is no intervention from ground.
So it looks like our rough braking is coming to a close here.
देख सकती हैं कि जो करंट आल्टीट्यूड है चंद्रमा के सतह से लगभग 10 किलोमीटर के आसपास है। जी हाँ, हम अपने
This is a critical part right here. I have to hit this properly.
जी हाँ, हमारे प्रधानमंत्री जी श्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी हम सभी का उत्साहवर्धन करने के लिए दक्षिणी अफ्रीका के जोहानसबर्ग से जुड़ गए हैं।
So the rough braking is officially over now. Now they're in that the attitude hold.
Yes, we are privileged to have with us Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi ji, who has joined us from South Africa's Johannesburg to encourage us.
Now you should be looking to that vertical velocity. It should be starting to come down now. You notice that it just started to tick downwards.
आप ये देख सकते हैं एटीट्यूड होल्ड फेज भी बहुत ही आसानी से लैंडर फेज ने पार कर लिया है और अब फाइन ब्रेकिंग की शुरुआत हो चुकी है। अभी हम ये देख सकते हैं कि लैंडर की ऊंचाई लगभग 5.6 किलोमीटर है, जो कि इस फेज के उपरांत लगभग 800 मीटर हो जाएगी।
They still appear to be slightly ahead
We
of
can
the
hear from the
timing, but that's okay.
mission operations team that the sensors are performing nominally. And we are currently in the midst of the fine braking phase, which is going to continue for 3 minutes. And the altitude is going to be reduced to nearly 800 meters at the end of this phase.
जी हाँ, जैसा कि आरुषि जी ने बताया,
So you can see that vertical velocity has come down. It was at 60 before, now it's already down to 30.
800 मीटर वर्टिकली होगी और यहाँ पे लैंडर की हॉरिजॉन्टल वेलोसिटी
And they're going to basically scrub off like all of the horizontal velocity in this phase here, because they want to basically target a landing point
of the lander module, and we can see that the downrange traveled is nearly 831 kilometers.
For now everything's going well. Yes, we're just in the fine braking phase, so it's going to be basically targeting a spot on the surface that it wants to land at and trying to scrub off nearly all of the vertical velocity. It's going to hover at about 800 meters above the surface, or not hover, but get to about 800 meters above the surface in that phase.
Very close to the moon's surface, nearly 2.6 kilometers, as we can see.
So we're just coming now to the ending phases of the fine braking.
जी हाँ, अभी आप देख सकते हैं कि लैंडर की ऊंचाई लगभग 1 किलोमीटर के आसपास है.
You can see that we're almost at that 800 meters. We're at 1.1 kilometers in altitude.
We are nearing the final phase of the power descent.
And you can see all of those velocities,
which is going to be the vertical descent
zero.
phase or the local navigation phase.
So now the lander's in control. It's going to pick a landing site and it's basically going to slowly come down towards it. This is the final landing phase.
एकदम करीब आ चुके हैं. हाँ, आप तालियों के गड़गड़ाहट से सुन सकते हैं.
Looks like they got it.
हम लोगों ने तीसरे चरण को भी बहुत ही सफलतापूर्वक
So
हासिल कर लिया
it's
है.
officially hovering now at 800
अभी
meters.
हम
That's what's
वर्टिकल
happening.
डिसेंट फेज में आ चुके हैं, जिसकी शुरुआत भी बहुत ही अच्छे ढंग से हो चुकी है.
So it's hovering at 800 meters and it's going to basically figure out now where it wants to land and then it's going to start moving towards it.
Lot of applause.
And it does this by
That,
throttling the engines. So it can basically hover, throttle them down, and it'll start coming downwards, throttle them back up, it can stop again. It has a lot of fine control over where it wants to land.
The altitude is being brought down from 800 meters and we are nearing and approaching the lunar surface.
This is looking really successful.
जी, आप अपने स्क्रीन पे देख सकते हैं कि लैंडर का हाइट लगातार कम होता जा रहा है. इस समय हम लैंडिंग साइट.
You can also see that it doesn't use all of its engines at this point, so it's just using 2 of the 4, I believe.
इस फेज के दौरान लगभग 150.
And it's landing at the South Pole, 69 degrees south. Yeah. So you can see how the vertical velocity just increased. So now it's coming down to on the spot that it wants to come.
As well as the vertical velocity is now being constantly reduced. And the lander module has begun its descent towards the landing site.
So now it's just 300 meters above the surface. It's basically coming in to the target that it picked. Take a look at that live camera. We might be getting some cool pictures from it. I don't know if it's still updating.
किया गया है, लैंडर पूरी तरह से उसी को ही फॉलो कर रहा है. इस समय हम लगभग 200 मीटर की हाइट से भी कम आ चुके हैं.
We're at just over 3 meters a second, 100 meters from the surface. This is looking fantastic.
अब हमें देख सकते
I think it's going to come to another hold here. It's going to hover again, and then it's going to make its final descent from 150 meters. I think this is the last phase here.
We are approaching the vertical descent phase 2, which will have the lander module hovering at nearly 150
Yeah, this is perfect. They got it to like, they're perfectly hovering right now. This is really cool. So much better than the Chandrayaan 2, my goodness. So yeah, the rover will be deployed after the landing. So yeah, it's once they're on the ground, then there's a little door that opens up, and then the rover will come down the ramp. Here you see the rover is the lander is moving a little bit over to the side, and it's coming back down again from 150 meters.
The sensors that are updating at this point
and
are
you can
providing
see in the camera,
confirmation
check out the
of the
live
safety
camera.
of the landing site.
As expected, the retargeting is going on, and this is a very good signature for the lander. अभी आप ये देख सकते हैं कि लैंडर की ऊंचाई लगभग 65 मीटर के आसपास बची हुई है.
Only 50 meters from the surface now. Everything looks good.
Currently, only 2 engines are now being fired, and we are nearly at 0 velocity, vertical and horizontal. We were hovering, and now we are approaching the moon's surface.
धीरे-धीरे लैंडर की वेगमान को कम किया जा रहा है.
Coming back down again
अब लगभग
for
50
the final targeting.
कम आ चुके हैं.
We can see the Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, who is here to encourage us, and he
just
is
10 meters from the surface
looking
now.
at the visuals.
Looks like we're going to touch down a minute early.
जी
Fantastic.
हाँ, आप अपने स्क्रीन पे देख सकते हैं कि हम लैंडर मॉड्यूल
I think that's a success, guys.
People
Wow.
are applauding. Let us all wait to hear from the Secretary Department of Space and Chairman
Fourth
ISRO,
country to the moon.
Shri S. Somnath.
Absolutely fantastic.
लैंडर मॉड्यूल पूरी तरह से सेफली और सॉफ्टली चंद्रमा के सतह पे लैंड हो चुका है। ये हम लोगों के लिए बहुत ही गर्व की बात है।
This is absolutely
हिंदी में
beautiful.
एक कहावत है कि चंदा मामा दूर के, लेकिन अब हम ये कह सकते हैं कि चंदा मामा अपने घर के।
बहुत ही उम्दा. The hard work of the entire ISRO community has come to fruition.
This is excellent to see. Excellent to see. Oh man, that's wonderful. Congratulations to everyone who was involved in that mission. It has been a fantastic journey.
आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी, नमस्कार. Sir, we have achieved soft landing on the moon. India is on the moon. Sir, I request our Honorable Prime Minister to address us and bless us. Thank you, sir.
It's so awesome that the Prime Minister is behind this like this.
मेरे प्यारे परिवारजनों, जब हम अपनी आंखों के सामने ऐसा इतिहास बनते हुए देखते हैं तो जीवन धन्य हो जाता है। ऐसी ऐतिहासिक घटनाएं राष्ट्र जीवन की चिरंजीव चेतना बन जाती है।
I'm really happy too.
ये पल अविस्मरणीय है। ये क्षण अभूतपूर्व है। ये क्षण विकसित भारत के शंखनाद का है।
I have no idea what he's saying.
ये क्षण नए भारत के जयघोष का है। ये क्षण मुश्किलों के महासागर को पार करने का है। ये क्षण जीत के चंद्र पथ पर चलने का है। ये क्षण 140 करोड़ धड़कनों के सामर्थ्य का है। ये क्षण भारत में नई ऊर्जा, नया विश्वास, नई चेतना का है। ये क्षण भारत के उदयमान भाग्य के आह्वान का है। अमृत काल की प्रथम प्रभा में सफलता की ये अमृत वर्षा हुई है। हमने धरती पर संकल्प लिया और चांद पर उसे साकार किया। और हमारे वैज्ञानिक साथियों ने भी कहा, इंडिया इज नाउ ऑन द मून। आज हम अंतरिक्ष में
This is so great to see.
नए भारत की नई उड़ान के साक्षी बने हैं। साथियों,
I'm looking forward to what comes next, because the moon is the first step, right? So we might be seeing some more ambitious missions from ISRO, maybe going to Mars, going to other planets, maybe some manned missions. I don't know. But this is absolutely fantastic. Yeah, in terms of the social implications, I mean, yeah, whenever you're developing things in space, I mean, inevitably things that you learn there are going to trickle down into other parts of society. So it's great to see India continuing to try to push the technological part of their society, and I think that's definitely going to help them. Yeah, what is cool though, as you mentioned, is that it's amazing it's amazing that they're able to pull this off on such a low budget. Like, it just shows you that it's possible to perform space missions on lower budgets, right? You don't need to have, billions of dollars in order to land something on the moon. You don't need to do, like, it's about trying to figure out ways to operate with the limitations that you have, And if you just have everything, sometimes you miss things that are obvious and right that are would have been obvious to someone who has less resources. So yeah, it just shows you that there's more than one way to achieve a mission. That being said, there were a lot of high-tech things on Chandrayaan 3, so keep that in mind. There, I wouldn't necessarily call all of the stuff that was on there low budget, but yeah, definitely a very ambitious mission considering what they were able to achieve. So congratulations to India and to ISRO. And I hope they continue to push the boundaries of space and push the boundaries of what we as engineers are capable of, to hopefully bring us closer to the ambition of making ourselves a multiplanetary species. I think that's important. So anybody who's engaged in that pursuit certainly has my respect. In the meantime, Astra will continue to try to engage in that as well. So yeah, we hope that we can also participate in that mission. Maybe not as in an ambitious of a way, but at least in a small way. And then maybe engineers that are in this group can, in the future, go on to participate in cool missions like this. Anyways, guys, it's been great hanging out with you guys. I hope that you guys are inspired a little bit, and I hope that you will continue to follow ISRO and their accomplishments throughout the next years, because I'm sure they're going to be in the news a little bit. So be sure to stay tuned. And remember to expand your horizons.